So hello and welcome back to Unfazed Under Fire. I'm David Craigots, the leadership resilient guy, and your host and moderator for the show. The reason why I launched this podcast was really to support leaders to develop their impact, their greater impact as leaders, but also because of the volatile, uncertain, and crazy times that we're in now, with resilience becoming one of the top competencies that a leader has to have. We also address that issue on the show. And today I'm very excited to be launching a new series entitled Navigating the Top, where we talk about the trailblazing executives who share their journey. They talk a little about their career, how they got to where they are today. We get to understand a little bit about their leadership philosophy and also learn how they may be tapping into new sets of practices and approaches to be resilient during these crazy times that we're in. And I'm doing this series also because I know that executives love to hear from other executives because they understand what it's like to be in the line of fire every day dealing with similar challenges. And my first guest today, I'm honored to be joined by Dave Digirolamo. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Digirolamo, okay. Director of Audiovisual at Building Infrastructure Group, is also known as BIG. And BIG is a highly respected company in the Washington, D.C. area, specializing in cabling for telecommunications, networks, and data centers. And Dave has been a leader in the AV business for over 20 years, having had a number of roles as a consultant, a sales leader, even the CEO of his own AV company. And I've had the great fortune of getting to know Dave as his executive coach way back in 2012. And we all kind of wish for those simpler times. I've seen him and I've seen Dave take on a much bigger senior roles over since then. And Dave, I know you're a leader who understands the link between leadership, strategy, culture, and execution. And we've stayed in touch over the past 12 years. I've been very impressed by your record of building high performing teams and organizations as you've gone along, even during that difficult period between 2020 and 2021 with COVID. And you're also a husband and a father of three boys in college. One just exited, I think you said, into graduate school. So that's a little bit of lop off the finances there. And that keeps but I know that keeps your hands full and that you're proud of all that. My understanding, you live in the Northern Virginia area,
Yes.
right? Well, it's a pleasure to have you. So thanks for joining me on the show today.
Well, thank you very much, David. I'm very excited to be here. And as you alluded to a minute ago, we've had, over a decade of time getting to know each other now. And it's been a great pleasure getting to know you and understanding your perspective on leadership. It's been fantastic to talk with you over the years. And I'm very excited to be part of your podcast today.
Oh, good. Well, thanks for having me. I thought we'd start kind of taking a step back and getting to know Dave a little bit more. And if you could share a little bit of your background and your journey that led you now to leading this audiovisual division at BIG, and sharing a bit about your career path and a few key experiences you've had along the way that have been seminal in forming you into the business leader you are today.
Sure. I guess my first exposure to leadership really happened when I went into the United States Air Force. I was a young kid at 19 years old. I had tried a year at college that did not go swimmingly. So I ended up in the Air Force for 4 years. I did an enlistment for 4 years, which was really the first time I was exposed to leadership. And leadership in the military is different than leadership in the business world, but the principles of leadership, as I'm sure you're aware, are exactly the same. And in the military, they put a very direct light on leadership. They will teach classes about leadership called leadership, and they put a light on that because leadership in the military is a life and death situation. So it is not it's not optional, and there's good leaders and bad leaders, and so a lot of that, my first exposure to all of that was when I was a young kid, very impressionable, and I always enjoyed it. And in the military, it's easy to excel if you're a leader and you want to go to those classes and learn those things. You can do that. So I had the great fortune of being exposed to that in a textbook fashion very early on. Then after I got out of that, I went back to school and finished my degree, met my awesome wife and got married. So then at that point, I needed to find a job, and it was time to go and work in the real world. So I fell back on my military training and ended up in electronics as a day one green technician in the AV industry. And once you fall into that industry, this industry, it's hard to get out of it.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. It's a
but
fun industry.
hey, that's
Yeah, it's a
it.
fun industry.
It's a very
Yeah,
small, tight industry.
yeah.
So that's kind of how I got my start in AV. And since then, I've done kind of all the roles in AV, right? Technician, and then engineering, and then project management, sales management, ownership, operations management, kind of all of those roles. And now where I am today, my role, our company, Building Infrastructure Group, kind of has two sides to it. One's the structured cabling, one's the audiovisual, and I work with the whole team on the audiovisual side to continue to grow that business within our larger business of Building Infrastructure Group.
That's great. Well, and imagine, as you and I'm sure there's a number of leaders that kind of they stay in kind of one train, finance or operations or sales. You had the great fortune of really being in almost every role in the company that you now oversee, right? So, what has that done for you as a leader to know that you've played those different roles? What does that do for you as a somebody that's kind of inspiring and motivating people to do their best?
That's a great question, and the answer is that sort of with my experience that I had for in a day one technician role was sort of seeing where those issues are and some problems with that. For example, our technicians are in the field all the time. They go to customer sites all day, every day. So sometimes the communication from the main office is lacking. And so I knew that and I felt that when I was in the field previously. And so those are things that I've been able to identify having been there that I can now address better. And I can also understand when a field technician comes to me and says, "Hey, you guys aren't communicating well enough with us." Then I say, "Oh, you're right." And I understand where that is coming from. Let's address it. So it does give you a very different perspective, at least it has for me, on sort of the different pain points of the different people along the chain of getting a project done, which is we're a project based company. And so all the
Absolutely.
different pieces have to work together, and everybody sometimes has different pain points, but that perspective has been very, very helpful for me to be able to relate.
Well, I have the ability to develop rapport. I know you've been in those shoes. It's not like empathy, like pretending like you try to imagine what you were like. You were in those shoes, so you
Right.
can really appreciate what they deal with every day. Well, as you look at let's walking in, I mean, you can remember your, every any role. We're walking in your first day, and you're now the head of AV division for Big. What kind of leadership principles guide you in that situation, or even on a day to day when a conflict emerges? What do you pull from to help you effectively get grounded and present to deal with the challenges facing you in a day to day, or when you're walking into a job for the first time? How do you orient yourself as a leader?
Uh, it's not always easy.
Yeah, it's true.
I would say that
Everybody would do it if it was, right?
that's right, and it can definitely try you as a person and try your character at times. But I will tell you that one of the real principles that we've kind of grounded on is culture, and how culture affects every other aspect of the business. And there's no question in my mind that that's in my mind in our business, it's the single most important factor, in the sense that if you strongly and genuinely take care of your employees and your people at every level, they will in turn actually take care of your customers, which will in turn take care of your business books. And so we feel like, as a company, creating that culture is vital. So this starts at the interview process, the hiring process. There's an old saying that I heard 15 years ago that stuck with me every day, is that you hire attitude and you teach aptitude. And
Yeah, it's well said. Well
that's
said.
how you really control your culture, is you bring in the right attitude, whether it's work ethic, honestly, just generally nice people, right? And you bring in people that will fit into the culture. It's a hard work environment. We are a construction type firm where we're doing a lot of hard work. It takes a certain type of person to do that and do it well and excel at it. And as we bring those people into the fold, if they have the right attitude, it's easy to fold them into the strategy and the general direction of the company all as one.
Right.
So alignment then becomes very, very important. understand what the goals are, understand where the team is going, and that person with the right attitude will jump on board and run with you. All I feel like always. So that has really been a key principle for us.
Yeah. Now, how would you define the kind of the ground of your culture at Big? What do you first day in during the hiring process? What are you letting employees know they're walking into when they get oriented and onboarded, and then day to day? What do you want them to know about how we do things around here?
So when you walk in our office, our company colors are orange and blue. So, and it's bright orange. It's bright orange. When you walk in, as soon as you walk through the main door into the main office area, we have different words written on the wall, big and painted on the wall in orange lettering. It's loyalty, ethics. Um, there's a bunch of them that really immediately will convey what our core principles are in that sense. And it's really all about getting people who understand that on a day-to-day basis and to come together around that. So we really like that, and we try to set that from day one across the board. And people will either fit or not fit very quickly in those environments. There's a lot of accountability. There's not
Mhm.
much drama or finger pointing on our team. So if you get a person in who says, "Hey, I didn't do my job because XYZ prevented me," we pretty much already know that that's really not always going to be the case. So yeah,
Right.
we really try to instill the direction of the company from the very get-go. And it's really a loyalty to each other and a culture of understanding that there are days where I'm going to do my job plus some of your job, and there's days you're going to do your job plus some of my job, and we're going to take care of each other all the way through this thing. And that's really the mindset of the people that we have, thankfully.
Well, that's awesome because I mean, I think most human beings, if they are given an opportunity, that's the kind of environment they'd like to be in. Um, and yet, there's a learning curve for that sometimes, right? Doesn't mean that the person isn't a fit, but there's a learning curve. So, what happens when somebody may not meet the values? I obviously not going to fire them that day because there's a learning process. So, what do you do around supporting them? I mean, ethical. You can maybe share, think of a story without naming names, but
Right.
give me an example of how you help those people recognize the value of the values and learn how to align with them.
Well, I can give you a specific instance, and I won't name names, but we did
Yeah.
have an instance where there was a situation that we didn't make a deadline happen. And it actually was an internal deadline that we had that our team needed some certain things to be done by a certain date. And the person that was responsible for doing that, very late in the process, came back and just said, "Hey, we're not going to make the date." And at that
Mm.
point, I said, "Okay, well, wait, that's not usually the way we do things. We figure out how, if we need more people or more time or whatever, we'll figure out a way to do this." And it immediately hit me, and I had a discussion with that person, and I said, "This is exactly the feeling that we can never let our customers have from our employees. This is an exact perfect learning instance where delivery of bad news late in the game to the stakeholders that could have easily been avoided. This is what my customers feel like if we ever do this to them. We can't ever let this happen." So you take that instance of an internal missed deadline and try to relate it to, hey, our customers, who that's what we care about, right? Is making sure they never experience something like that. And that person was like, "Well, I never really thought that by delivering bad news to you, you're delivering it to somebody else, and it puts the
Yes.
people in the chain in bad light." So that became very apparent, and the person was completely understanding, just not
Yep.
having
They
ever
got it.
thought all
They
the way
got it.
through it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it happens. And listen, no, it's easy to sit here and say our culture's perfect. Nobody's culture is perfect, and ours is nowhere
Right.
near
Right.
perfect, but
It's an ongoing.
um,
It's an ongoing climb, so to speak. Right.
ongoing for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a great example. And again, sometimes we have people that are coming from various backgrounds that may not have been the best experiences they've had. They don't know things. And to give them the gift of teaching them how to operate at this level of high performance and meritocracy, and what that gives them and how that empowers them is a really, really beautiful thing. I would imagine you've seen people, many people blossom at Big because they came into the culture. I don't know if you have any good stories of that. Of somebody that came in, they were a little bit, clumsy with the culture stuff, and then became a champ. Maybe down the road became a champion of culture.
We have a ton of examples of those. We have a lot of examples of those. And what we really have, it's interesting, David, because our company dynamic is that most of our company, 3/4 of our company, are guys who are out on client sites every single day. And so
Right.
bringing them into the office environment sometimes and feeling that culture more, they have an opportunity very quickly to kind of jump in. They know the company culture because they've been around, but when you live it day to day to day, and then the guys on the client sites are also living that same culture. There have been a lot of examples where young kids come in, they've had a college culture or a bad company culture previously or something along those lines that were not structured the way we are. And they come in and they love, most people love it. And they have we try as part of our whole culture is to enable people at all levels to make decisions and let them stick. And part of that is the accountability and the ownership of your work product. And so as all of that stuff starts developing, people run with it and they go and they start doing their training and they get excited about taking the next step. There are clear paths in our company for promotions and movement within the company. So yeah, we have a lot of examples of people who come into a culture, get a little bit of culture shock at the beginning, and then say,
Yep.
hey, let's rock and roll. And I love it. And they, just like you said, they become the champions of it because they went from one side all the way to the other side of that pendulum swing.
Well, when you have an emphasis on culture like this, there's a certain belief you have about human beings, right? There's a belief that if you get the heart, soul, and mind aligned, not only will you get a great employee, you will give that employee an experience that they'll remember for the rest of their lives because it's meaningful and they're able to contribute and it's also satisfying to see the outcomes that they're a part of, right? So yeah, that's great. Um, what strategies you think, and maybe it's more of the same, but what strategies do you use to really foster collaboration and maintain that culture? But in addition to some of the things you said with the values and the onboarding, what are the things do you do that you find have an impact on ensuring that there's that strong sense of connectivity, collaboration, and that positive experience of coming into work every day?
So work is a grind, right? The day-to-day work
Right.
is a grind. And that you will build common experiences together that way in your work life every day. Our belief is that where you tighten up and where you learn about somebody's kids and their outside things are when you get together outside of work. And if you have that level of trust and relationship with all of the people in the company, it can really, really build that culture. So we approach that several ways. And I'll give you an example. Um, a huge number of us in the company are Washington Nationals baseball fans. I know that's hard to say right now for anybody who follows baseball, but we are. But so what we
Hey, you
have
had a
done
World Series a couple years ago, so
a
there
few
you go.
years ago, it was great. It's been a little tougher here lately, but um, when the Nationals have their home opener, which historically they always play the very first game of the year, we shut down our office for the afternoon. We take the entire team down to the Washington National Stadium and we have an opening day party. And it's everybody gets a ride down there together. That's one example. Another one that is coming up in about 3 or 4 weeks is that we do a company fishing trip. So, we're located
No.
in Northern Virginia. The Outer
Right.
Banks of North Carolina is a 5 or 6 hour drive away. And we go down there, we rent 2 or 3 houses on the beach together. And we leave Friday. We shut the office down a little early Friday. Everybody drives to the Outer Banks. We go fishing on charter boats Saturday morning. And then Saturday night, they have chefs and stuff come in and cook a lot of the stuff that we caught. And we have a big
Man,
dinner
that's cool.
Saturday night. And Sunday, everybody drives home. So we do a whitewater rafting trip once a year in the springtime. So we do all these things outside of work that you get elbow to elbow to somebody offshore fishing and catching fish together.
Yeah.
You get a different level of relationship than you do at work.
That's
And
absolutely,
that's
that's
what we
absolutely
love.
true. Yeah. And then as far as keeping communication going and how you make sure everybody knows what's going on and having some level of transparency, what are some strategies you do around that?
That's a tough one for us and an area that we're trying to get better at because we,
Right?
I have a saying, just my personal belief is that almost every problem ever at work relates to a communication breakdown somewhere.
Yeah,
Just some communication is the source of most problems. And
sure
so
is.
we try the best that we can to communicate clearly and often. So we have emails that go out all the time to the entire team. We have stuff like that that's just communication. And then we try to do company meetings as often as we can. It's difficult in our company on the project nature of our business with
Yeah,
the
it is.
deadlines that we face for all these different projects to say, hey, we're going to have an all hands meeting here. We have done that. We haven't done one in a couple of months, but that's the best way really is to get all the
Yes.
people in the room together. And honestly, David, you know this, I'm sure, but people will air out some grievances sometimes. And as the guy that's standing in front of the group, you've got to answer them and address them clearly. You've got to be honest and what you said, transparent about what's going on. So if somebody airs a legitimate grievance, sometimes you got to stand up front and take it and just say you're right and we're going to fix it.
Right.
But yeah, it's a when that happens, it's great, I think, because it gives you an opportunity again to connect on a deeper level when you're in those environments.
And that's where you get to walk your talk as a leader, right? That's where you demonstrate that we care about that, right? And by me taking a few bullets and collecting myself and coming back, and they see all that, right? And they respect, they come to respect that, I'm sure.
Yes, for sure.
We're going to go into another territory which we talked about uh, during the COVID lockdowns. I think we had an experience. Tell me a little bit about that challenging time and having to make management decisions, and yet wanting to maintain the culture that you built. Say a little bit about one of your favorite stories, or any way you want to share what that was like, how you got through it, and what came out the other side.
So COVID was, as is true for everybody, extremely trying for us in our company. When the lockdowns happened in March of 2020, we sent everybody home and we brought everybody back 3 weeks later. That was it. We were out of the office for only 3 weeks. We've never had a real work from home policy. We've never had a hybrid type policy. We have been an in-person type culture. Pros and cons, right? At the middle of COVID when you're doing that for sure. But
Yeah,
we it's good to have an alternative viewpoint and somebody to talk to when you're in those environments and things are really going
sure.
crazy. And so we brought everybody back. I'm very happy to say as a company we did not let anybody go all the way through COVID. We kept our team together. And I'll
That's
give you one
awesome.
quick example. This goes to our culture and how we operate. A lot of companies were decreasing staff, cutting hours, cutting pay, doing a lot of things that they had to do to survive. We turned it around, and immediately, as soon as this thing went into full lockdown, we gave everybody additional PTO. We said, hey, if you need to take time off to take care of yourself or anybody else, the company's going to pay for it. We took care of all of that stuff, and we maintained everybody's annual review schedules. We took everything like that, stayed right on track. We really never rolled down the effects of COVID to the team as much as we could avoid it. That goes back to one of those principles on the wall, which is loyalty. We're very loyal to our employees, and in turn, the whole team is loyal to us and each other as well. So that was one of those times in our industry where we deal in electronics. You couldn't get them. I mean, we had months and months where we could not
Because of
complete
the supply
projects.
chain.
The
Because of the
supply
supply
chain was
chain.
miserable for
Yeah.
us. Sorry, I wasn't clear on that,
Right.
but yeah,
No, that was good. We got it. We got it. We got it.
the
Uh,
supply chain was really difficult and really strained our business by not being able to deliver projects and so everybody had to pitch in and do different things at different times to keep everything moving forward. But we were very, very lucky, and sometimes I think it's resilience, persistence. I don't know what no individual piece got us through that. But when we go through it as a team and we say, hey, we're going to get through this no matter what, we had different people who came back to the table and said, hey, instead of using XYZ electronics that we can't get, let's try this other set that we've never used. Let's bring it in, test it, and let's roll it out to our customers. And so that's what we did to try to keep things moving. So people at every level of our company were, in a way, innovating ways to keep this business moving forward. And we did. We actually beat our revenue projections for 2020 that we created in 2019 before we ever knew what COVID was. And then 2021 also grew, and 2022 was our best year ever. So we pushed through those barriers, but it was not necessarily easy.
Well, I mean, and it must have been both harrowing and also uh, rewarding to see that both harrowing at those times. And what are we going to do? Where do that equipment is not coming in? So in situations like that, what did people do? How did the customers? And this relates to the next thing is the link is all of this links to the customer experience, right?
Yes,
Culture, it's all about the customer experience for a company like yours, right? So the
absolutely.
culture is a kind of wants is in a sense models and emulates what it wants customers to experience. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
How did that time impact? Well, to talk more first generally how the culture impacts the customer experience, and maybe then go into that time and show how that really had muscle at a time when it was very challenging for the customer.
So culture is everything to the customer experience. And if your culture is really good and really strong, people have a generally happy demeanor. They're not on the job site, on client sites, bad mouthing the company or something like that, which could happen if you had a toxic culture. But in our case, that culture is the foundation for our client success. We have a lot of clients who've been with us for 15, 20 years. And it's because they are provided good service by people who are happy doing what they're doing. And that really sums up our business model, to be frank with you. How that all related and going through COVID was that it wasn't always pretty. We had clients who were not happy with us when we said, hey, I can't get your box for 8 months. And you have remote workers who I can't provide you the communication systems to talk to them right now. That does not go well. That's a tough
Right.
conversation to have. And we came out of that. In fact, it's funny. I was talking with somebody just the other day, and our assessment of COVID was we really excelled with most of our customers, and we performed adequately enough to not lose the rest. And it's not a great assessment, right? But it's an assessment that
Yeah,
we didn't lose customers during that time, which
that's
we
a
could
big
have
testament.
easily. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. There was a lot of reasons for it, but for some reason they stuck with you. Obviously, they knew the situation at hand.
yes,
But at the same time, it goes back to the experience prior to that and the consistency of your culture and the customer experience prior to that and the longevity your customers had with you.
yes,
So there's a loyalty there too, right? There's the customer loyalty
for sure.
that you're able to, that customers are sticky to your brand.
Yes.
And that's just awesome. Um, and so, and then you have the results to show it all, 2020, 21, and 22, each year grew to your best year yet, right?
Yes.
So that's just a testimony to that, how all of that builds leadership, culture, uh, strategy, execution, results, right?
Yes. Yes.
It's an aligned system that works together.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. And I'll tell you, David, kind of on a personal note and a personal story here. We uh, focused very heavily on culture. We've talked about that extensively at this point, but all the way through 2021, 22, as a company, the majority owner was a gentleman, Pat Barron, fantastic guy, really nice guy, U.S. Army combat veteran, most compassionate, down to earth guy you could imagine. Was the main leader of our company. Quite frankly, he was the majority owner and the outward facing leader of our company. Unfortunately, surprisingly to everybody, he passed in his sleep on Christmas Eve of 2022.
Hmm.
And so when you
Yeah,
get in a situation like that and you want to talk about trying leadership and what happens next, that is something that happened in our company that allowed a couple of people in our company to really step into a leadership role. Um,
right.
maybe not at first by choice, but you see where we talked about how people step into the next role and how that's built, and the company culture has not changed one bit, David. I mean, not one bit. It is the
Uh,
same company to the core that it was before Pat left us. So it's a situation where it's, but you talk about a case study in leadership. You get rocked like that on Christmas, and
yeah, it's a kick in the
unexpected.
gut, man.
It really was
Yeah.
for everybody at every level of our company. And I mean, you come back after Christmas and you see three or four grown men standing around crying on each other's shoulder, literally, not
Yeah,
figuratively.
I
It
get it.
changes you as a person, and it changes the company. It doesn't change the culture, but the company, of course, changed. But it strengthened a lot of things, and it's sad.
Well,
It's his legacy partially, but it really
absolutely. I was going to say that. It's his past legacy.
it
Yeah.
really is, and what he built as his culture and his company has not, here we are 8 or 10 months later, and it is as good as it was ever or better. So it's just a testament to him.
Well, let me, in memorial to him, let me tell me one or two things you learned from Pat that have impacted your leadership and changed you as a leader.
I probably shouldn't tell this story, but I'm going to anyway. um, I knew of Pat. He had a huge reputation in the industry. So before I joined BIG, I knew who he was. And I knew that he was kind of this bigger than life guy. And so as I was exploring joining his company, Pat and I had set up a lunch date. So we were ready to meet. And I was extremely busy and not looking at my calendar. And I got a phone call from Pat about 12:30 when we were supposed to meet at 12 o'clock. And he says, "Hey, Dave, are we still meeting today?" I'd never met this guy before. And I said, "Well," I said, "Pat, I'm sorry. This is what happened. I just actually missed it." I said, I understand if you don't want to continue the conversation. And his character is so compassionate. He said, "Oh, no, it happens to everybody. Let's meet again." And so 8 years later, in essence, David, I stood him up for an interview. How many times can you stand a guy up for an interview and think you're going to get a second chance? It just doesn't happen. It was one of the first times in my life I'd flat out missed a meeting, and I flat out missed it. And he said, "Hey, come on back and let's do this. Let's have a conversation." And here we are, 9 years later. And so that immediately says to me, this guy is understanding, compassionate, leading a very hard charging company, and still wants to meet with me after I stood him up. That was a big deal to me, a really big deal. And that's his character.
But no, he knew of you though. He knew of your reputation in the industry as well, or
I mean, yes. And we had a couple phone conversations and stuff like
yeah,
that. So it wasn't a totally
yeah.
blind thing, but we'd never met in person. And we were going to talk about, joining forces and doing our thing. So it was a big meeting, and I was not there. So it was pretty bad. It
It's
was
pretty bad.
probably,
Well, we do all do things like that, and it's part of being human, and we have to have compassion. It's like when somebody has compassion for us, it's easier for us to have compassion for ourselves, right? And and that's a big one that I talk with my leaders today about how important self-compassion. You can't be compassionate unless you learn how to be compassionate with yourself and give yourself a break from time to time when you do things like that, right?
it's true.
So yeah, yeah.
It's very true.
Now, you and I have also talked about this. We live in quite kind of crazy times, right? And there's so much noise, and every day it seems like something else is happening out there that makes your head spin. How have you found? How have you found? You know, work as being a respite to that, or how do you deal with? What have you seen, and what challenges has that brought to your business? Like a lot of times we don't talk about this, and I'm not trying to make a huge deal, but I think it's important that we start talking about it with business leaders. Like, how is the world and the political situation, the war, and all the stuff that's going on? Of course, we got kicked by COVID, and then it just kept on rolling, right? So
Right.
it's been one thing after another. How have you found that's affected the way you lead, the way if you've seen it impact your employees in different ways, if you've seen it having effects in how you hire and manage people. I'm just curious what you would say about that.
It's a huge issue, and you're right. We don't talk about it enough. It is a situation where if you paid attention and gave weight to all of those things, you would never get out of the mud on a daily basis. You just couldn't.
Yeah.
There's just no way you could rise above it unless you mentally said, I'm going to get out of this news cycle that goes on, or whatever, call it the news cycle, the politics. The news is the politics anymore. There's no such thing as news.
Yeah.
It's all politics. And politics, one side or the other, there's just no common ground. And it's interesting, and this is a little diversion from business, but a minute ago we were talking about alignment and getting people on the same page and all of those things that go into a culture. And if you think back to an event like 9/11, the weeks after 9/11, our country was one entity with one mission and one mindset. It didn't matter financial classes, business, none of that mattered.
That's true.
Everybody had an alignment around an event that happened. And if you can, in our business, relate this story back to our business, which is that our alignment is our work that we have to do 8 hours a day, every day. That's together, we're going to do that. We have a saying, and we've talked about this a little bit, and I'm going to keep it rated G here, but our saying is to rise above the BS and understand that, yes, we could throw a little dirt at this group. They could throw a little dirt at us, whatever all that is, internal or external, whatever it all is. And now if you lump in all the outside factors like the news, the politics, the economy, these are all things you can't control, you can't fix, you can't change. So if you just, as a group, rise above it, and we say that to each other all the time, just rise above the BS. And I hate to use the French, but that's the idea.
That's fine.
It's forget about the noise in the background and maintain a focus on something that's really important, which for us is our work and our team and our culture and our experience for our customers. And that's what, if we can just stay on that and drive towards that when we're in the office together. Outside of that, right, my focus is my family. And so you have different focuses at different times of your day potentially, but you can't get distracted with all that garbage. It's just too much noise to process for people.
Right. Well, I agree with that. And I think you pointed back to what an organization and a great culture can do for its employees and its customers. And that's create a protective bubble where
Yes.
you can go and have meaningful endeavor, connect to other human beings, which lockdowns kind of took us away from.
Yes.
And now you have that place at work. You can go out and you're rubbing shoulders with a fishing boat, trying to reel in your blues, whatever you're catching, or go to the baseball game, and you can go through those projects and get to the deadline and please the customer, and that is, and then you can go, and then because of that, and I don't think that still some organizations get the impact of giving a person a good day so they have the energy to go back home and be loving with their family, right? That is in of itself a gift that a great culture gives, and a leader that cares gives to his employees or her employees. And that you're marking it down, because I agree. Um, you know, um, I look at, for example, the Maui situation, which we have lost as many lives, likely in some 2,000 children are missing, and we're not galvanizing around we should be galvanizing around like that, like 9/11. To me, that's to me is big,
That's right.
and that's not happening. But you can't scream to the top of your lungs to get anybody to listen to you about that, right? What you have to do is take that in and say, what can I give to the people around me? It's almost like you have to transmute that, and that's a practice of resilience that I get in my clients. Is like, how do you transmute that ache that you feel into care?
Yes.
And give back the way you can. And at some point we all might be called to a greater task, right? That may happen, but it'll be obvious when that happens. In the meantime, we've got our jobs, we've got our families, we've got our friends, and that's a great way a beautiful way to turn that around, and as if you will, right?
Yes. Yeah, I agree. And there are events that happen that impact us there that we can't avoid, right? We try to, as I said, we rise above the noise level, I'll call it that. And that's the day-to-day garbage that comes at you. But these events, some of these events are really big. The Maui fire is unbelievably large event in history, and it's an event that you can't just gloss over and say let's disregard it like you
Yeah.
can on the daily news and stuff like that. And when people are actually impacted by these things, COVID was another one that just obviously everything since COVID has felt um, large. Like everything
Yeah.
just feels more intense. I don't know why that is. It does for me, anyways. It feels like these events are more intense, but there are certain ones you do need to pay mind to, and the majority
And
of the small stuff is noise in the background.
and you do your best to contribute and give back and help in any way you can.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, and just going back in another direction to, if you would think back on your career and like you become the leader you become today, not by accident. I mean, it is a certain way life happens and you meet life. So it's not like you figured it all out ahead of time, right?
No,
It's
no,
always
that's right.
the challenges that come and how you approach those challenges. If you think about, you know, a highlight or a moment in your professional journey that was really galvanizing for you around leadership and that this perspective around culture. Would you do you have a time that you remember when that was, and would you share a little bit about that?
I mean, unfortunately, the first one that pops in my head, David, is when the owner passed unexpectedly, and how much
Yeah,
that rocks a
that's huge.
business. And it rocks people. We were all close friends with Pat, so that rocks you on an individual personal level as well as business culturally and everything else. So that's kind of the top of the mind one that we've already talked about as far as that being tested. Career wise, being tested is I've had lots of failures along the way that have built character or leadership or however you want to look at it. But I had my own business for a while that I closed down with that. It was trying and difficult at different times, and shutting it down was a challenge for me, and felt like a personal failure at that time. And now looking back, it was really an opportunity to be tested to my core of everything that I had in my character to get through all of that. And so you go through those experiences, and I now have a saying on my whiteboard that says, "Don't fear failure. Fear being in the same place next year as you are today." In other
Yeah,
words, the failure is not the problem. Lack of advancement is the problem, and not advancement. It's lack of everything going forward. Lack of forward movement is where a person can get stuck. And so personal growth, that's really what it is. Personal growth is what it is. And so when you go
right.
through an event like that, yes, maybe on the day it's all occurring, it might feel like a failure, but you've got to come out of it and grow from it and keep on going.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's something that you seem to be finding within yourself that is resilient, right? There is, whether it's the phoenix from ashes metaphor, or getting kicked in the gut and going back and coming back stronger. Because resilience to me is not just about getting through a tough time; it's coming back stronger because of the tough time.
Sure.
Like, so if you would say in those moments, quiet moments, obviously you took action. You got up off the couch. You didn't stay in the, didn't stay melted. But as you move forward, what are some things you do that helps you develop and continue to moving forward and motivate you in a certain way to honor what has to be honored? Because you have to honor the grief, you have to honor the sadness, you have to be with the experience. I mean, that's part of life. So
Sure.
if we sometimes we try to race too much forward away from the pain, and the pain itself it can be a gift in a certain way. Not that we want to feel it,
Right.
because it does something in us. It softens us, makes us more open. And you look at Pat, he was a very compassionate, caring guy. He came by that honestly somewhere along the
Oh,
line.
for sure.
He made certain decisions along the line about that. So if you could say a little bit about what you do to find that resourcefulness in you to get through tough times like that, what are some things that you do?
That's a tough one to pinpoint. And this, I feel like there's a lot of stuff that we've talked about that you can learn. You can learn leadership. You can learn these different things by studying. Even as you pointed out, compassion is something that you can learn and get into. I hesitate a little bit to say well, and you can learn self motivation without a doubt. you can train yourself to say, I'm going to get up and get this done today. I think for people who've been through the military, you get ingrained with this certain, you
Yeah.
are going to get up
Yeah. There
today
you
and you
go.
are going to make your bed. And
Yeah.
if you don't, I'm going to bang a trash can lid in your ear until you do. You you learn a
Yeah.
piece of
That is good
self
training. Yeah.
motivation, and quite honestly, once you, I feel like being motivated is easier than being not motivated, and so once you learn that, and once you go through an experience like I did in the military, I feel like that was so impactful on understanding that they really don't care that pile of rocks gets moved from over there to over there. They just want you to do it, and you've got to be motivated to go do it. So you go do it when they tell you to go do it, and you start to learn. I don't want to call it resilience, but you learn a motivation internally to say, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it now. I'm going to do it later. I'm just going to get it done and get it done now, and that's the end of it. And that's an becomes after an event like the military, it becomes part of your character that you have no choice but to go get it done. And so, um,
Right.
I it's an interesting question, David, and I don't know how much you can learn that. I guess you can because I did, but
Well, I think what happened, my takeaway from that is the military taught you how to find that spark inside. It's an inside out game that really points again that yes, the external job is to move the rocks from one point to the other. Your brain is telling you, I don't want to F and do that,
right,
right? But then there's something inside that says, I'm going to move and I'm going to do that. And when you start, my significant other is a therapist. She talks about always with her clients taking opposite action. Like, you don't feel like getting up to do a run, do it anyway. You don't feel like going over and, you know, showing some compassion to somebody else, but you know it's the right thing. You get up and do it anyway and practice doing it anyway. And it's kind of opposite action. I love that. And I think
yes,
there's also stoicism is another avenue that you can learn that. And that the Stoics said, don't make life so important that you don't show up for it.
right,
Like
that's
don't make,
important.
don't like, so it's something about showing up and doing your best, right? It's not about being perfect. We're not, and we learn along the way, there's no way I'm ever going to do it perfectly. I'm going to
It's
do it
not.
better than I did before. And perfection is still something I may seek, but I know it always can get better every day.
Oh, for
Something
sure.
can always improve every day, right?
And
Yeah.
another piece of that same thing is if you don't show up and if you aren't motivated to do whatever it is that you're supposed to be doing, your team and the people around you, and not just from a leadership perspective, but from every different level of it that makes up a team, you're letting somebody down next to you if you aren't naturally inclined to get it done and you decide not to do it, you've let somebody down along the way somewhere. It's an automatic letdown to somebody else if you're not doing your stuff. And that's so some of that
Yes.
is motivation to not let those other
Let other
folks down.
Well, that's getting outside of yourself, and you've run across probably narcissists a few in your life, people that are totally about themselves, or people that tend to be takers and not givers. Those are people that don't fit into your culture, right? So we're looking for people that want to contribute and get outside of themselves
Yes.
for the sake of something greater. And you at Big, which is a great name for what I'm about to say, you created a vision that's bigger than everybody else to accomplish something that we can't do by individually,
That's right.
right? And you're instilling that in your culture. It sounds like.
Oh, we try to for sure. Um, but it's funny that every company, every environment, every relationship, that's true. I mean, take a husband wife relationship. If you're not showing up and putting your effort in, I mean,
It'll
it's
die.
right. And I think it's just true as humans that you've got to be there. You've got to be present. You got to try. And if that means getting off the couch tomorrow, that's what you got to do. I mean, it's just part of who
Yeah,
we
it's
are and
it's
what we're
it,
called to
it's
do.
it's called living.
That's it.
Yeah. Well, this has been a great conversation. I just want to give you an opportunity to round it out. If there's anything else you want to share for those maybe rising in the executive ranks or aspiring to be in the executive ranks, or maybe looking for some insights into how to grow their leadership impact. Anything you want to say that summarizes or brings it together today?
Um, that's a little bit of a loaded question. It is, if you're considering kind of the next step or growing in the leadership, do it. Um, there's there are a lot of resources out there. Call David; he can help you for sure. But there's a
Thank
lot
you.
of there are a lot of ways to grow, and sometimes if you don't have somebody telling you, we alluded to this early in this conversation that some people just have not been exposed to it or haven't been told about it, haven't had a military experience, which I keep harping on that, but it was because it's a strong and short time frame and a deep impact. But even over a natural career, some people haven't been exposed to really strong leaders and had somebody to emulate. And take that chance. If you're listening to this, you're somewhat interested in leadership, and find somebody, call David, call somebody that can help you um, own your leadership. And everybody has these traits inherently in them. You just have to
That's true.
understand them, reach in there and grab them and own it and just go do it.
Yeah.
So the best thing I could say is if you're toiling with your leadership or trying to understand it in greater clarity, is spend time studying it, understand where you are and where you're trying to go, and make a plan to get there. And call David; he'll
Yeah.
get you there too.
I didn't pay him to do that
No,
either.
no,
So,
later.
no, but I mean, I think it's, it is instructive that, everybody has that kind of leader within them, and there's something that has to spark it. There has to be an
Yes,
interest and a desire to be that. If you're not interested in that, don't go down that path until it's sparked. It does take, as you're saying, you've been through situation of COVID and losing Pat and other situations. I just still remember the days back at ABS with Bob Zillion, right? And Patrick, and how that was a little bit of a crazy time too. But it was a lot of fun too. I have fond memories of those days.
yeah, yeah,
So,
for sure.
yeah,
And that it is very helpful also to have other people to bounce these ideas off of. So if you can
yeah,
openly talk about leadership with somebody else, it's tremendously helpful. A lot of cultures and companies probably don't outwardly talk about leadership and use those words. And if you're in that environment, find somebody that you can talk to about leadership and what that means and how to grow into that. And it's there for the taking. You just have to go take it.
that's right. Very well said. Well, Dave, I appreciate you coming on the show today and spending your time with me today. I also want to thank everybody else out there that's listening. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us on Unfazed Under Fire today. I hope you found there was a number of nuggets in there. I hope you mined a few, and I look forward to seeing you next time on Unfazed Under Fire. Thanks for showing up. Have a great day.